All right, let's get started. Good morning and good evening to the audience and our speakers for the 13th Transatlantic AI Exchange web session. Today is June 7th, 2022. I'm Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, now living in Silicon Valley for over 30 years, and spent half of my career in building new businesses and the other half on innovations in global corporations. Today I'm at Intel's headquarters in Santa Clara and part of an incubation office working on topics around artificial intelligence and the data center of the future. We are again super excited bringing together high-tech experts and connecting them with the up-and-coming German and European startup ecosystem. Allow me to provide a quick overview of this Transatlantic AI Exchange initiative. The Transatlantic AI Exchange is a platform that aims at accelerating and expanding the transatlantic knowledge exchange in the human-to-machine economy, what we call the so-called fourth industrial revolution. We foster exchanges on AI and create the grounds for entrepreneurs, researchers, investors, the German Mittelstand, of course, and policymakers to build long-term partnerships. Within only 1 year, we have been building an incredible network of experienced people, creating 12 virtual sessions to share useful and valuable knowledge to over 3,000 attendees. We also hosted the first virtual EU AI conference on March 22nd, which alone had over 1,100 attendees from a record-breaking 84 different countries. Thanks to the team at AI Hamburg, providing the backend support for today's event. I'd like to thank our increasing list of partners who continuously help us to grow this community. And there are a lot of them. I don't want to mention them all by name. We are running a little bit out of time, but thank you to all the partners. We hosted the first virtual 2-hour EU AI conference on March 22nd. The full video is now available for free in our event section on our website. All our videos are artificial intelligence enabled to easily search for words, and you can jump right to the video, and this video clips are powered by Clipper. We are excited to also announce our 2022 awards program to support entrepreneurs in their journey. Any person who attended at least 2 of our 2022 TAIX events, share and follow us on LinkedIn can win up to $1,000 towards a travel expense and up to 6 hours of coaching, mentoring from TAIX experts. We have already secured an impressive list of upcoming events and are excited about the topics and the experts supporting our program. Please join us for the upcoming events. The Leadership Garage, in partnership with the Transatlantic AI Exchange, is hosting a 2-day workshop for leaders to discuss in interactive classes the AI potential and digital business models. If you believe our events are of value to you and your network, we greatly appreciate to share and like us on our LinkedIn page. If anyone has transatlantic or AI-related topics of any sort, please reach out to us and we will consider building them into our program. We are excited to announce yet another experienced panel of experts to discuss industrial AI, how innovation solves today's supply chain challenges. Due to the logistical challenges, however, we will not be able today to offer a usual 30-minute networking session afterwards, but we should be able to address some questions within the 16-minute sessions towards the end. So with that, let's get to it. Paul, our today's moderator, thank you very much for organizing and moderating today's event. Before you start, please share with the audience your background. Thanks and all the best.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate the overview of this session for today. My name is Paul Shahidi. And like my previous speaker, I was also born and raised in Germany and came to Silicon Valley. I've been working now at the intersection of industrial systems and AI for over 15 years. And I am focused on improving supply chains and manufacturing quality through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So one of the driving factors for me growing up in Germany was my early exposure to the amazing mechanical engineering feats coming out of it. I was always wondering, how can we take these machines and make them smarter, just like our phones or computers? And this is what ultimately led me to Silicon Valley. More recently, we've seen that the supply chain interruptions occurring around the world have triggered an even more pressing need to speed up this development of technologies like AI, to help ease the shortages through increased throughputs, higher uptime, and less waste. So today's session is aimed on figuring out how do various global corporations and startups deal with this, and what have they done in the recent times to reach these goals. Without further ado, I'd like to start introducing our speakers next. We have 4 amazing speakers lined up today that are joining us for today's session. They're leaders of startups and established corporations from both Europe and the United States, and I'm very excited that they're joining us. Our first speaker for today's session is Brad Myers. Brad is the Executive VP and COO of Amstead Digital Solutions, a global company that provides railcar fleet management and predictive analytics solutions. Please help me welcome Brad Myers.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it very much. Good to see you, and thank you for the opportunity to participate with the Transatlantic AI Consortium. It's quite impressive and an honor, so thank you. I look forward to it. I've got some very high-level things that I'd like to share as far as the organization, who we are, but Amstead Digital is an established company. We are a sub of Amstead Rail, which is a major global freight rail component supplier. We participate in pretty much every major freight heavy haul market around the world, and have more recently entered into the transit space. But Amstead Digital Solutions is, as you described a bit, an end-to-end platform. We integrate onboard telematics with artificial intelligence, married with different types of transportation management solutions, software, and tools. So it's a unique position for our organization, but also something that's very exciting as we look forward towards digital technology. If we could roll forward to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about our organization and how we are structured from a values perspective. It's really 4 key components, if you will. Customer first. Everyone always wants to be customer focused, but we tend to always take the philosophy that the customer has to come first in every aspect of our business. We lean very heavily on creating an environment of collaboration and innovation, and we like that freedom of creativity to crash into ideas and see what comes about. And then certainly always acting with the utmost integrity is a critical element of our entire organization. And then lastly, for us, we are unique. We are an ESOP organization. So every employee based in the United States is actually an owner of the company. So as they look towards customer first and creating that innovation and always performing with the highest levels of integrity, they directly benefit as an owner of the organization. If we could roll to the next slide. I'll just close a little bit on our mission. And you know, I think the underbelly of Amstead Digital, even Amstead Rail, is we truly do have a culture of innovation. And it's been interesting to see the last few years, the creativity around the strategies given COVID and the disruption, how we've been able to keep that together. We'll talk more about that as we go through the session. But as it relates to our overall mission, we're very much focused on finding creative ways to weave the digital technologies that we can provide to our clients that assist them in lowering their carbon footprint, creating certain levels of efficiencies within the supply chains, which ultimately benefit the end customer, the stakeholders, the environment, and so forth. So our goal really is truly to create a platform and deliver on a holistic view of that entire digital supply chain and create those efficiencies. So.
Thank you, Brad. That was awesome. Appreciate the great introduction. Our second speaker for this session is Simon Tuchelmann. Simon is the CEO and co-founder of Creatize, a rocket ship startup that moves manufacturing to the cloud. Please help me welcome Simon.
Hey, Paul. Hey, everyone. Really happy to be here. Yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of Creatize, and looking forward to the discussion. I brought a couple of slides. So what does Creatize do? First and foremost, we are a cloud manufacturing platform. So what does this mean? In very simple terms, it means that we're turning the old and rigid and linear thinking supply chains into supply networks. When we go to the next slide, we see why we do this. Because everyone here that joined this discussion knows managing supply chains is increasingly complex, but super critical for success of every industrial company. When we go to the next slide, we see the big problem. The big problem is that the uncertainty and the volatility we have seen in the last couple of years will not go away. Actually, they will increase. Pandemics, war, terrorism, climate change, and other macroeconomical crises will just lead to more and more disruptions. And we need to handle these disruptions in a smart way. When we go to the next slide, we see what Creatize actually does. So we use our cloud manufacturing platform that we have developed to turn supply chains of our customers into smart networks. And this is how we basically help large machinery and equipment companies in Germany and Europe to really save, on the one side, a lot of millions in cheaper manufacturing, and we help those companies become more resilient with smart networks. So we really transform their whole supply chain set up from a linear and rigid supply chain into a network. When we go to the next slide, we basically see that we have a large global network of machine capacities that Creatize orchestrates thanks to the cloud manufacturing platform that does most of the things automatically, and is powered by AI, which is very important for us because we believe, when we go to the next slide, that the complexity that we are seeing cannot be handled through sheer more people in procurement, more people in supply chain. We really think that every industrial company needs to apply AI to solve this critical topic. And this is why I'm super excited to be on this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I love the diversity and your mission. Awesome. Our third speaker for today is Mike Rushton. Mike is the CTO, Energy and Industrial Assets Europe for C3 AI, one of Silicon Valley's most well-known disruptors in the enterprise AI space. Please help me welcome Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. So with almost 20 years actually of technological experience, just, driving different type of AI initiative, digital initiatives and so on. So almost 4 years already at C3 AI and helping different customers on Fortune 500 actually, to build their own digital experience and to make it really effective and productive at the end. So about our company, we are really world's leading technology provider for enterprise AI platform, and we provide cross-industry AI applications. And the main thing about this is that we can really address the main, I would say, issue for most of the companies we talk to. It's about speed, how fast you can really come to a productive operational solution based on AI, and second, how you can scale. So you don't address your solution only for a certain type of equipment, but you try really to scale it all over a different type of equipment. You try to scale it for different type of facilities within a limited time given to you, right? So we're talking about months. We are talking about months that you can really cover most of your operations with the help of AI. Next slide, please. So we provide from our side a platform, which is one unique, federated and managed service for different type of participants in this journey. So we're talking about developers, we're talking about data scientists. Definitely we address system integrators to help to build specific customized solutions for their customers. Also very important, we do talk to subject matter experts, who can be really the best providers for their know-how, their knowledge, and how they can apply different type of still unknown methods based on AI to the practice. And also definitely it's about business analysts who can really leverage the ability of AI to help to analyze the market, to help to understand actually what can be done better in terms of the efficiency of the processes they're working on. Next slide, please. We are agnostic. So we address not only supply chain, but also we address the different type of scenarios like reliability, process optimization, production optimization for oil and gas. So there are different scenarios that can be addressed from different angles. And the last slide, please. And today we will address our question for supply chain management. And for us, supply chain management is much more just talking about logistics, demands, and so on, right? We are really talking about integrated operations. We are talking about the things where sustainability depends on the supply chain, like scope 3 for sustainability, like reliability and predictive maintenance will depend on different supply risks in terms of the planning actions, of the upset of the equipment which are covered by reliability applications. So when we address supply chain, for us, it's a much bigger topic than what you can see just, as part of your solution at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Fantastic. And I have to say, it's just getting better. And for those of you thinking the panel couldn't get more better, I have our final speaker now joining us, who is Matthias Hirlemann. Matthias is the VP, General Manager, Technology Enable Group at Intel. It's one of the easiest intros of all. Everybody knows Intel is the largest manufacturer of semiconductors in the world. And I'm very happy to introduce Matthias here today. Please help me welcome Matthias.
Thanks, Thomas and Paul, for having me on this panel. And thanks all other panelists for making this going forward a pretty exciting session. So about me and my role, as mentioned, I'm heading technology platform enablement. What is this all about? It's basically getting technology, getting IP into the hands of the design teams and actually making sure that they get product back. In this aspect, I deal a lot with basically dependencies and actually complexity and working supply chains. And I want to use the opportunity in pointing out that a key aspect of kind of the dimension of the supply chain is, first of all, and some of the geopolitical tensions, is surely kind of having a functional supply chain, but we will not be able to navigate all the upcoming challenges by basically just optimizing what we have. So what we need to do as an industry is really make fundamental changes in that respect, that we kind of localize capabilities, skills in such a way that not every delivery has immediately kind of a global dependency. And Intel here has been announcing and is committed to do this. And an example here is Intel's EU strategy. And you see here a very complex chart, kind of what you need basically to product and to design products. And I want to bring up the attention to the supply chain of not just kind of having goods shipped around the world, but if you really, really want kind of to localize a supply chain, you have to have in the same geo R&D. You have to be able to access in a local way design IP. You need skills which help you to do the design, the tools, flows, methods, who are able to come up with an architecture. We are talking a lot about hardware when we talk about supply chain and shipping stuff around. But there's a lot of software ingredients which are needed. And yes, at the end, it needs to be manufactured. And semiconductor manufacturing is about silicon fabs. There's a lot of talk about this, but it's also packaging fabs, and it's also basically testing facilities. And we want to bring this together. And we are really doing a significant invest going forward with this localization in Europe. And an aspect which I also want to do, we don't want to do this just for us. We have, and we want to invest heavily in foundry services, which should give also customers of us the capability to tap into a localized supply chain. And if you go to the next slide, I mean, we see a lot of positive feedback from the people, basically from the local governments, from the EU, and just nicer picture of kind of a building in Magdeburg, where kind of the fab is planned, where they basically kind of do a lightning of one of the biggest buildings to welcome Intel. And I think this is one of our contributions to ease the supply chain for everybody who wants products, who wants AI, who wants the hardware.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matthias. I appreciate the overview, and I'd like to also thank all our assembled speakers for the informative introductions. You as our panelists have perfectly set the stage for the coming 40 minutes. And what I would like to do next is actually start diving into our session. I will be bringing up questions that I will be asking to the panel. And I would like for everyone to please take a moment and go around the room, then respond to them. At the end of the session, if there is time left over, we will also be hopefully have the opportunity to take a few questions from the audience. Well, let's get right to it. Thank you. First topic that I want to touch on, what else could it be, is COVID. We're just coming out of a very odd time. COVID led to dramatic digitization and innovation simultaneously. I'd like to ask the panelists, what is the most notable challenge you encountered in your product and supply chains, and how did you solve it? Please get started. I'll hand it over to Brad first.
Well, that's a very lengthy set of questions and answers that could come about. You know, I think the obvious thing that was the most disruptive was first the supply chain, but secondarily, it was the recreation on how employees were engaging. You know, that reaction, fortunately for most organizations that had some leapfrog on different communications tools, meaning Zoom, Teams, things like that, right? At least allowed people to stay connected to one another. But kind of recrafting people's expectations and accountabilities was probably the most challenging thing I think we went through with the people side of it, if you will. But we quickly adapted by altering kind of our approach, like most people had to do, as far as being able to work in subset teams, stay connected, but even more so globally, you know, to your earlier statements and some of the panelists. Amstead Rail, through our IT group, to be honest with you, led by Mike McDonald, had set up quite a few years ago different types of AR opportunities across the globe in our different manufacturing facilities. So we actually were pretty well equipped to handle the ability to stay connected into one another organizationally. So that was a big driver, I think, for us. But the working differently, I think, would be the most prominent piece that we had to deal with. I mentioned the supply chain. Clearly, the entire world stopped. So we had to deal with a lot of corrections in our inventory, but I think it drove, I would say, a lot of rethinking around resourcing, if you will. You know, we had a lot of dependencies in specific geographies, and that's led to some significant changes in how we behave today and how we even design our products, which is probably the most prominent theme of that. So something else that Matthias said, I think resonates with me, is that geographical idea or concept of anchoring into regions. So you have this, what's the right word here, diversity, if you will, in the supply chain. Had we had more of that, I think we would have been a little bit better along, but we've learned a hard lesson like many people did. And since then, I think we've started to correct that. And we've got a few other things in the pipeline that we're working towards.
That's exciting. I think you're tapping into a very important topic in all of this, that how do we make the manufacturing more nimble? And I think that's a perfect segue to bring Creatis actually onto the stage. I know Simon has a very interesting thesis about that. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the what Brad said in the end is exactly what we saw. So we built up a global network of machine capacity, and that was prior to COVID already, because we always believe that making like building a network globally will just increase resilience, and obviously also make the costs go down and increase the lead times, etc. But what we didn't foresee is that when complete regions finally shut down, as they did in China in January 2020, we were able to shift all of the production to Europe and to other regions in the world within a couple of hours. And that was really exciting, and to see that something like this works actually, not only in theory but actually in practice. So through COVID, we never had any disruption in our network because we were always able to shift to other regions, and we just saw that what we believe is that turning supply chains into manufacturing networks is basically the future to make your whole value creation more resilient. And yeah, our thesis is that most of the companies eventually will move from a very rigid network that is very fragile to a robust or even anti-fragile supply network. And we help companies do that. And obviously for us, it was just a proof of that our thesis works, and this is a validation basically. So very exciting for us, obviously very tragic for a lot of companies and all of that, but for us at least it was quite exciting.
Yeah, I like to also add something to that, the one specialty I think between Amsterdam and Creates is also you're talking about heavy manufactured goods, cast parts, manufactured parts. And aside from the digital space, that's extremely difficult to shift region to region. So you really pulled off, I think, a very close to a magical feat, I want to say there almost, and you're setting a trend for the future. I'd like to now hand it off maybe to Intel, get also that strategy.
Okay, so we have actually been faced what I would call with a double challenge because the COVID kind of gave a big boost to digitalization, which basically means that our products and basically our supply was not good enough. So we had to really beef up kind of what we can deliver. At the same time, basically dealing with lockdowns and basically interrupted supply chains, specifically with kind of getting the parts from different places to different places. And we applied certain patches. So we could charter our own planes. Our products are not heavy, as you just pointed out. I mean, you can basically pile millions worth of chips in a plane. And so we were basically taking advantage of passenger planes being stopped and basically being available for basically carrying goods or carrying our chips. And I think the other topic which you have basically been seeing is semiconductor itself is has already a very distributed supply chain, and Intel is present in a myriad of different countries. And therefore we had actually opportunities to reroute basically goods because we had presence, we had basically the necessary kind of tax precautions, preparations, which you basically need to reroute supply chains. So I think we fared quite well. And I think this is also the benefit of a huge multi kind of billion global company that we have inbuilt a lot of these opportunities already. But midterm, long term, we clearly see that the localization is a key. We have heavy footprint in US. We have a heavy footprint in Europe, not just starting now. We have a fab in Ireland. We have kind of design footprints in Asia. And so we have to strengthen these things very, very clearly. The learning is really that you need to work more with your suppliers. The current industry is very well built in the direction that you care about your customers and you assume kind of a just on time, so that basically your goods, which you kind of need, are just automatically coming in and your supplier takes care of. And I think this has significantly changed. And I think that's the key learning. And this is also where we actually need and we're going to invest.
Excellent. Yeah, I think with Intel being probably world's largest supplier of semiconductors, I think it's made early news during the pandemic with the chip shortage, essentially. And you already, I think, started talking about that, but Intel is doing significant work to address that around the world, I think also with new chip fab facilities. I'd like to also now hand it off maybe to Mike and get C3's perspective.
Yeah, thanks, colleagues. I think it was a really good description of all challenges and as well as opportunities, right, in this disruptive environment we had more than 2 years ago. I remind myself, and I'm really proud of being part of the story, where one of the healthcare technological providers who was in charge for global, worldwide ventilator products delivery, they addressed us exactly supply chain problems, issues they had specifically for this demanded, highly demanded actually productions. Yeah. And the point was that they had really different type of facilities around the world, which were acquired historically from different organizations, which resulted in a complex IT landscape with supply chain data stored across disparate ERP systems. You can imagine the situation, right? And at the same time, you know, the delivery of the final products, that was a kind of, you know, dependency of a human life and this product, right? So it's really, I mean, it's a huge pressure, not only pressure economical, but also psychological pressure on everyone. And the task we had to solve actually, yeah, they were not trivial at all, as you can imagine, yeah. So we're talking really about hundreds of stock keeping units that should be prioritized to keep the lead times actually, yeah, in a certain amount, yeah. We're talking about a different type of supply chain risks, yeah, to be taken into account for this production of ventilators. And we were also talking about allocation of different SKUs actually around the globe for the most optimal delivery, right? And at the end, with the help of AI, with the help of enterprise approach, yeah, we were able to deliver something working, productively working in 4 weeks, right? So it could, and I hope really, it could really save some lives actually, yeah, and provide this healthcare technological company actually, yeah, with the proper solution at the end.
That's amazing. I like that we really started addressing, as I like to call them, some of the fires that had to be put out at the beginning of COVID. So we see supply chain changing, manufacturing specs, drawings, sourcing from different places, immediately trying to address almost, you want to call it humanitarian challenges, and then thinking ahead, how can we make this a maybe more robust or a robust MO, modus operandi, for the future to avoid some of these things, right? So my next question for the panel is, in this process, you know, as you were putting out your initial fires and you were initially fighting to be able to still serve your customers' needs, you discovered systematic gaps and opportunities that will potentially also prevail beyond COVID. How are you planning to address that and essentially take this forward into the coming years, as we almost expect these events to not be singular events? We are even currently seeing this to continue. And what were the learnings you took away that you are planning to implement also in the future and even build out on? I'll hand it off right now, maybe, because I know Mike has a actually very interesting viewpoint to that. I'd like to get started with C3 on this question.
Yeah, there are a bunch of angles, let's say, yeah, of what you ask. It's a really brilliant question, Paul. Thanks. And let me provide a different story, yeah, which comes from, you remember actually the beginning of the COVID, right? And frankly speaking, nobody was serious about this, yeah. No one ever serious, yeah, about disruptive events, frankly speaking, yeah. Nobody believes that something can happen, like economical crisis, war, whatever, right? That's the nature of our human beings. And I remember I was beginning of February, yeah, I was demonstrating one of our supply chain applications. I was really proud, yeah, fancy, nice looking, you know, everything, yeah, customer happy, what can be better, right? And suddenly, some of the metrics, because it was demonstrated on the live data, and suddenly some risk factors went up. And I was like, you know, the first thing what I thought, it was buggy software, right? So I thought, oh, what a shame, yeah. There should be a kind of, you know, something goes wrong actually with my code, yeah. What can it be? And then we checked, yeah, and we saw actually the reason for this were the news from China, and China was closing the borders exactly at this time, and the software, the AI approach, yeah, was really able to react immediately, right, based on the recent news providing some confidence factors to what was available as information at these times, and providing this insights information and also kind of recommendations based on these insights to the operators. And that's what I think needs to be seriously addressed in the modern production facilities, in the modern logistics centers, and overall simply to leverage this AI speed, AI power to analyze first global information and to provide insight in the most fast way in comparison to human beings.
I agree. It sounds like we are looking at a very fast changing environment in which we need to move more and more nimble, I think, and we cannot rely on long cycle times, long cycles anymore, and things have to just happen faster. Maybe Brad, what's your takeaway and how are you going to adapt moving forward to events like this?
Well, similar to Mike's comments, I think the supply chain snap, if you will, it hit us the beginning of March of 2020. And within 90 days, as everybody had to deal with it, it went to a standstill. I think the first eye opener for us was when we looked at a lot of the major sources of the components that go into our onboard electronics and technologies. There's a heavy concentration of a lot of the raw materials in a particular region of the world without getting geopolitical. And it by default caused a global ripple. And as I mentioned at the opener of this discussion, it really opened our eyes to the idea that the diversification of the supply chain is a criticality. Given the fact we're based in the United States, I think a lot of people on this call that are listening and know there's not a lot of heavy manufacturing, if any at all, for microchips in the United States. So that's something that has caused its own shift through our government to rethink, who's there and who's participating. And obviously one of the colleagues' logos on the screen is participating. But there are a number of companies that are trying to change that geographic supply chain. So that's probably the first, I would say, big piece. The second piece for us was rethinking our global partners from an employee and resource standpoint. What I mean by that is that we've recently brought on different ecosystem partners that are part of our software development in different regions of the world to give us some additional flexibilities. That disruption at the immediate onset of COVID, it was that work from home, hands off, but there were a lot of other regions of the world that were still trying to stay engaged and support their own economies and their own incomes. And as a result of that, we've identified some pretty strong new partners. The third one that I think is interesting that you and I discussed prior to this particular meeting or panel was the introduction of HoloLens through augmented reality technologies. Again, my hat's off to our IT group at Amstead. The gentleman by the name of Nick Hughes and Anthony Johnson were really the two guys that started to pilot and develop this concept of leveraging the HoloLens technology cross-border since we couldn't travel, right? So we had to participate and support our customers. As I said, customer first. We found a creative way to leverage the technology by simply shipping HoloLens out to different locations and allowing those regionalized employees to actually actively connect into engineering resources and other things to be able to troubleshoot and identify situations that customers were dealing with even during COVID. And what that has evolved into is actually a service now that Amstead Rail and Amstead Digital now offer, but it also is embedded in our engineering and our manufacturing. So through that technology, partners around the globe are now able to participate in an AR environment when we talk about engineering and design work. Even though we had some levels of connectivity prior to COVID, I think that accelerated our interest and our adoption to use more of that kind of technology embedded into what we do day to day today. So I say those are probably the three big buckets that we've got a big, strong interest in and motivation to keep going as we go forward in the future.
I love that. What a fantastic story. Who would have thought that one of the most under the radar industries, freight rail, is one of the pioneering companies jumping headfirst into the metaverse? Yep. Essentially, really what you've done here, removing geographical boundaries and allowing your service engineers to essentially be virtually present at the site, troubleshoot the difficulties that you come across. Very, very exciting. Simon, I'd like to hand it over next to you. What were some of the innovations that you were able to achieve and you plan on investing on further and building out to further secure your position in the future?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in the beginning, the disruptions in the last couple of years, and actually in the last couple of months, even with the war in Ukraine, is something that just was a validation for cloud manufacturing and distributed networks. And for us, it was clear, okay, after the last 2 years, we will double down on investing heavily into smart and digital distributed manufacturing. And we know, and we see that already, that the complexity of a network is like increases exponentially with the number of partners or machines or just data sets we increase and include. So we are forced to use artificial intelligence and other tools in order to make sense of the data and to handle the complexity. And therefore, I think from our side is in the beginning you always use artificial intelligence because you think that like there might be an application that is exciting, but here in our area we have so many data points from all of our partners worldwide, from every transaction of our customers, and therefore we can really leverage this technology. And this is what we are going to do for the next couple of years, until we have the whole world connected in our cloud. And I think what we hear day in and day out is that customers move like source locally, and this even increases the need for a global network, because every customer, like not every customer can build their own supply chain and manufacturing hubs in every region. It's just too expensive, right? For big companies like Intel, yeah, that's possible. But for small, medium-sized businesses with a couple of 100 million euros in revenue, this is just not possible. And therefore, I think more and more of customers will move to some providers that can help them with building networks that utilizes other manufacturing capacities and make sure that they increase the resilience without increasing the cost dramatically. And I think this is really the key, because we can increase the resilience, which is an insurance, but this will cost usually a lot. And therefore, this is always a trade-off between like how much backup and resilient do you want to get and how much cost optimized you want to get. And this is in the end what we saw in the last 10 years. Everyone went local, single sourcing, right? Because it increases economies of scale and it gets you a lot of benefit. And now everybody wants to move to triple, quadruple sourcing, right? But what will happen to the cost, right? What will happen to the overhead and procurement? And this is like the things that you really have to think about. What do you do when the costs go up and you cannot handle the complexity? And I think this is why we're really excited to be at the point where we are and see it as a huge wave we can ride in the next couple of years.
I think you've hit a very a strong nerve here. We are all always now thinking, how do we hedge against these events? And taking the perspective of looking at it from a decentralized way, which is typically known only in the software industry for peer-to-peer music sharing and things like that, but taking that concept to manufacturing is fantastic. You know, there's also an environmental impact, of course, that you're alleviating. You're eliminating waste. You're eliminating overages and capacities that would have gone to waste usually. And I love the idea that you're doing this. And I know that I want to hand it over to Intel next, and I know that Intel also has a very strong opinion. We spoke about that in the preparation for the call, but what are some of the ways that you will plan to change the business model maybe in the future based on the things you learned during COVID?
So as mentioned also by Simon, there was an immediate reaction once the supply chain topics came up, basically to localize. But we all live in a world where globalization will continue and will get even more. And I even believe it is an ethical responsibility for us in driving globalization, because we want for the good of the people. We don't want that there is kind of high earning industrial states and the rest of the world is looking at some countries of Asia still and looking at Asia. So we have a responsibility, an ethical responsibility to drive globalization. And you actually see that now it's the right time with the Ukrainian war. You see kind of what support Ukraine is getting and how the world basically sticks together. So how do you kind of play this out in localizing at the same time kind of globalizing? And the idea is really that you maybe build kind of local center of excellence or competences or clusters, any way you call it, which are to a certain extent independent, but at the same time are linked into kind of a global economy. So you have clusters in different parts of the world, and depending on kind of where there's issues, where there's conflicts, you have an opportunity to basically shift things around. I think that's one of the things, but that only works, as mentioned before, if you don't depend on really every delivery on kind of a worldwide network. And I think when you think at this, I think the key innovations which you're needing is, first of all, IP protection. When you do things in different center of competences, you have to find a way to pass IP within kind of given constraints, which is sometimes a really cumbersome topic when you look at export regulations, etc., etc. The second aspect is then also security of the supply chain. I mean, we see now also the Ukrainian war showcasing there's a lot of hackers who try to get access to many computers, networks, basically pieces of the supply chain to disrupt the supply chain. So a key challenge going forward is how you apply security concepts to the supply chain, because currently I believe supply chain is very, very vulnerable. And the third aspect, which I'm actually seeing, is supply chain needs automizing. So when you, for instance, link supply chain with current activities in Industry 4.0, where you basically rely to a large extent on systems, you take people out, but you also take limitations out, which are actually coming then by needing operators, etc. So how can we kind of, from a manufacturing to a customer, have a really automated system? And it really starts in the fab, where kind of you can directly call into the fab, kind of talk to tools, which basically then help you to do the certain things going. So I think this is a huge topic which will get traction. And last but not least, we know it from investment banking. I think machine learning, artificial intelligence needs to be built in the supply chain, what I call risk management. Mike pointed out that topic of that his system detected the closing of the Chinese boundary, which is then a positive, good achievement, but the question is, it's after the fact. So how do we make sure that we know about these things and have basically early warnings, risk management in our supply chain, which highlights these things and gives us a runway to react to these things?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think that's you're pointing to so many things that are interesting. I'm seeing the topic of war also recurring here, and we've been almost in our answers dancing around this topic a little bit, but I want to actually take it on. I want to talk about this because the Russia-Ukraine conflict is here, and it's immediately affecting supply chains, and I'm sure it has also affected your businesses. What were some of the ways that you either did or had to counteract the effects that it was having? And we've already been hearing some of the things like security shortages, things like that. And I'm curious to learn a little bit more about how you did that. Maybe Simon, would you like to start? Tell us, how did the war actually affect you, and what did you do to counteract?
Yeah, so I mean, from our end, we don't have any production in Russia or in Ukraine, so we were not directly impacted. Obviously, for my me as a 30-year-old, I was shocked because I never there was no war in the EU. Just like from a personal point of view, it was definitely a big shock for me. But from a perspective of the supply chain, there was not a big impact. The biggest impact we had was the material topic. So there were a lot of sanctions going, like I think 2 or 3 weeks after the war started, where the EU and also the US sanctioned material from Russia. And this is something that's super difficult to actually follow. I think probably Brett can tell us a little bit about that as well. Like, how do you make sure that the material like the nickel and the other elements of the alloys are not coming from Russia? I think that's incredibly hard. And I think there's also no solution yet I know of that gets applied. So I think there's a big question mark when it comes to like, how do you actually follow the material down to the actual source and make sure that the block of metal you are buying doesn't have any materials from Russia in them. So that's something like I think I've not seen anyone handle. Maybe Brett can talk about that. But this I see as the biggest biggest impact from our side, because luckily we didn't have any people on the ground and also no capacity there.
So I guess I'll take that ball.
Go for it.
I guess the first and foremost, my heart goes out to the people of Ukraine and those people that are in Russia that are dealing with this, because it's such a heart-wrenching situation that the rest of the world is watching from far away, right? So we don't get to experience it, and God forbid we ever have to. As far as our views, you're spot on, Simon. I think the challenge of looking at raw materials upstream is really difficult to trace and track. Something you'd asked earlier about supply chains, but relates to this. I'd say that's one behavior that I should have mentioned before, is we've been diving deep into the birth of the raw material to the endpoints where we get our microcontrollers, as an example. And my colleagues on this panel, know quite a bit about it better than I do. But if you really follow the manufacturing from raw material to an end chip, in the case of a micro, you could have 8 or 9 different supply chain participants that do different activities, whether it's putting or burning firmware down onto the chip, or it's the layers with the circuit boards and so on, right? So back to what Simon said, I think our challenge is looking at different regional sources where we currently get components from, and trying to even get them to give us the insight upstream as to what materials are coming from where, is turning into a real challenge for us. So, dealing with the conflict has really been more about, as Simon describes, how do you go further upstream and how do you validate that? In today's world, a lot of our suppliers really don't want to give those levels of assurances because they're not entirely sure. So that's one maybe aspect of it that I can speak to. I think from an Amstead Rail perspective, our parent company, we've had operations over there for nearly 20 years. And fortunately, we had a very good business. But as a result, we've had to pivot pretty hard, and it's very sad in terms of the outcome. So there's been some disruption there as far as component supply, both to and from. But as far as the electronics go, that's really kind of, I think, the biggest hurdle and challenge that we're faced with is trying to look at it from a full-on supply chain. The other side of the equation, though, is because of the sanctions, as described, there is some level of expectation that maybe some of the draw on some other materials might just shift globally, meaning where they might source some of those raw materials that may be a benefit somehow downstream. But I think that's still yet to be seen. I lean on a Microsoft or an Intel in terms of looking at those kinds of things and hopefully freeing things up, because we're still struggling with it. We don't see the supply chain really getting any headwinds or benefits until closer to the end of the year, early next year. So just my 2 cents.
Great, thank you. I'd like to hand it off to Intel.
Okay, first of all, the Ukrainian war is first about doing the right thing. It's an ethical responsibility that we all as companies have. And only then afterwards, the supply chain honestly is an afterthought. So yes, Intel has been impacted. We have been getting goods from there. We have also had people there. We had a significant business there, and we made the decision basically to do the right thing and then stop certain things. Kind of going forward, it is kind of short-term questions, at least for our supplier, question of money. These things are not kind of only coming out of Russia. They are also coming from different geos. So we have kind of a multi-vendor, I call it a support system, also from our supplier, multi-supplier system. And it costs more. That's maybe given from an Intel perspective, big company. An easy answer, which is not applicable to everybody, but I think that's to a certain extent how we deal with it. I think the critical point is now, how do we make sure that the impact is not too high? And Brad brought it up. Chip shortage is not so much dependent, I would say, on the Ukrainian war topic. Chip shortage is really more manufacture capability. It's not limited by supplies there. It's manufacturing capability and honestly equipment, so tool capability. And there's a lot of money currently taken in the hands of the whole industry to close that gap. I think there's different predictions out there. And I think I'm speaking for Intel here, we still believe that the shortage will go on for the next 2 years. There might be specific applications where it's a little bit shorter, but there also might be activities where it's a little bit longer. You see and you hear about all these fab invests, tool invests, which are currently taken, but we will not see really these coming online before 24, 25-ish, because we have a lead time in building manufacturing. And yes, we jointly have to work through this, but I think we are having made major kind of steps forward, and the situation should get kind of better day by day.
Great. Thank you, Matthias. I want to hand it over to Mike. However, I want to add a little twist to it because we're running out of time here, and we have a small, we have a few questions from the audience. But I know Mike has one very interesting perspective on the next question that I want to ask. So please allow me to maybe skip ahead to the next question, Mike. But one of the things I would like to touch on that was asked by the audience is, how can we bring and use AI in manufacturing to have an environmental impact, to improve the bottom line, where we maybe also make a contribution to reduce the reliance or the vulnerability towards some of these events happening, and maybe do our share also to lower carbon emissions and things like that. I know C3 has done some exciting work, and I'd like to hand it off to you for that.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that's also a great question. It's also related somehow to the previous question in terms of how our German industry reacts, let's say, in general, on the priorities that were before and nowadays due to this terrible Ukrainian war, right? And you can really see by automotive market, for instance, automotive industry, I mean, that instead of just, working on profit values, on profitability, on net profit values, on the margin, on yield, and so on and so forth, they try to reconsider their priorities, especially in terms of their sustainability goals, as well as risk assessment, right? And this is a huge change in their minds, especially in terms of the planning, right? So they need to address bigger, much more global, let's say, planning issues within their organizations. And those planning things needs to be done in a more regular way, right? Or sometimes even in a real time. And that's a complete change and disruption into the current IT system. And the only answer or the only approach that can help them is about AI. And AI is not only just about machine learning. It's not only just about the way how you learn on the historical data. It's just a part of this, right? But AI is also about how you deal with uncertainty, how you can really analyze the big volumes of data. And this is exactly the chance, actually, specifically for our industry to solve those problems in a more efficient way. Hopefully I could answer this question well.
I like it. Thank you so much. We are out of time. I would like to actually another time take a moment and thank our speakers. All of them are super exciting. You have amazing opinions. I would love to spend another hour to deep dive with you. And I want to again highlight the diversity that we had on the panel. We're talking about freight rail, we're talking about cloud manufacturing, enterprise AI, semiconductors, something really valuable, bringing these amazing brains together in one session and being able to get the opinions, the experiences is truly invaluable to me. I'm personally very connected to this industry. I have worked and spoken and friendships with each one of you, and that's really something I am super proud of, having had the ability to bring these opinions to the forefront of the center stage today. And I wanted to thank you one last time for joining today. Thanks for that. And I would like to, with this, basically conclude the session. Again, thanks for your time. Thanks also to our participants, the great questions. I apologize we didn't have an opportunity to get more through them. If there is anything else, Thomas, I'd like to hand it back to you now. And that's a wrap for me today.
Well, Thomas is already gone. So thank you very much for all your participation. It was really a great panel. We really appreciate to have you all there, and hopefully we can next time have the networking session. And thank you again to all of the panelists, to all of the attendees, and wishing you a great evening.